Hey, how's it going? Today I'm going to be responding to a piece of criticism that I received by a user who goes by the name of Guitar Gunner on an excerpt of a video essay that I released 2 days ago, which was titled, Why Destiny Was Right to Mock the Firefighter Who Died at Trump's Rally. So to give you some context for what I said in this video and what I believe currently, the basic point that I was making was that Trump supporters' lives do not matter. And I wasn't coming at this from a place of just reflexive political hatred. It was a meditation based on the threat that I think they represent for the future of the United States of America and what I think the appropriate way to respond to that threat is. So the basic formula that I put forth in the video that Guitar Gunner was responding to was that we should judge the lives of Americans based on how well they comport with the goals listed in the preamble to the Constitution. And if they do a really bad job at meeting those goals or contributing to them in any meaningful way, then we can say about those lives that they don't matter. And then I use that rubric to justify why Trump's life doesn't matter and why the life of any so-called American who supports him doesn't matter as well. To give you some context for why I said any of this in the first place, because I can understand if you're watching as a Trump supporter and you feel, holy shit, like this is political extremism, this is just so wrong, I can't believe he would say something like this, but all of these thoughts that I'm having, I feel are just like a natural and just logical response to the kinds of provocations that we're seeing from Trump and his allies. I just don't think it's reasonable to lie out the ass about anything and everything and say you'll call in the National Guard and the military on American citizens and use phrases like the enemy within and describe the Democratic Party as a swarm of locusts and all these other dehumanizing terms and incite a riot on January 6th and do all those things and then say, yes, we're still entitled to be treated with civility and respect and as if we're a totally normal political movement. And the thrust of this excerpt that I published, along with the larger essay that it was a part of, was that this is all fucking insane. We shouldn't be treating these people like they're normal and like they're worthy of our respect. Everything they're doing is pushing us towards a civil war. And the purpose of my reflections on all of these points was to just form a framework for how to think about the hopefully preventable possibility that people will actually die, right? Like, if our politics devolves to such an extent that we're actually starting to kill each other because of our differences, I wanted to get to ethical bedrock about what's true there, right? If people are actually going to die, what are they dying for, and is their cause just? And the basic thesis of that clip and the wider essay that it was a part of was that this is bullshit. Nobody should be dying because of their allegiance to Donald Trump. And if they do, right, if they become a martyr for that cause, they're fucking retarded and we should make fun of them so that no other people get the idea that, okay, yeah, this is good and we should keep doing this and see where it leads. So that's a basic overview of how I feel right now. And before I respond to Guitar Gunner's comment, I just want to commend him and thank him for leaving what looks like a really thoughtful comment on this video. Because as someone who makes videos for the purpose of people like actually engaging with the content, it's surprisingly rare like how many times people actually respond to what was said in the video. It's usually just a gut reaction of like, oh, f*** this, I don't like this hurts my feelings. And yeah, like I'm not really interested in that kind of pussy shit. Like, I want to have a conversation. If I'm going to yell at you, I want you to respond to what I was yelling at you. You know, I don't want you to change the comment to, oh, you're an L, MAGA 2024, blah, blah, blah. Right? That's bullshit. That's not how you have a fucking conversation. So thank you to Guitar Gunner for actually engaging me in this conversation. Now, let us get to the comment. Guitar Gunner writes, this entire video is weak and full of contradictions, logical fallacies, and self-righteousness. I'll address each issue chronologically in the order that they are mentioned. 053, Corey Comperatore's legacy. Let's see what I said. If you're ignorant about American politics, Pierce's admonition of destiny probably seems like an all too sensible expression of disgust at an internet jackass who has the gall to besmirch the good name of a valiant firefighter who died protecting his family. About that section of the video, Guitar Gunner has the following to say. You immediately try to undermine Corey's legacy by insinuating that attending a Trump rally automatically negates his worth as a person. This is a guilt by association fallacy at its worst. By your logic, merely attending an event is grounds to dismantle someone's entire character. People attend rallies for various reasons. curiosity, support, or even open-minded exploration. It's intellectually lazy to assume someone's entire moral worth based on where they were standing. Now, I agree with what he's saying here, but I don't understand how that's what he got from what I said at 53 seconds into the video. So I'm just going to play it again to make sure that I'm not hallucinating. If you're ignorant about American politics, Pierce's admonition of destiny probably seems like an all-too-sensible expression of disgust at an internet jackass who has the gall to besmirch the good name of a valiant firefighter who died protecting his family. According to this article on Corey Comperatore... Okay, yeah, I didn't say shit about, like, just attending a rally makes you fair game for someone to kill you. So, on that point, you are wrong, Guitar Gunner. I didn't say that is what makes it valid for someone to kill you. Okay, from 108 to 127, political influence and moral hierarchy. Here's what I said. Article on Corey Comperatore. He was a stand-up guy, a true brother of the fire service, and a man of conviction. But in discussions of politics, where we're advocating for leaders and policies and ideas whose influence will affect many more people than your average stand-up guy and man of conviction, we need to be a little more critical in how we evaluate Corey's position on our moral hierarchy. And Guitar Gunner responded by saying, "You bring up the notion of a moral hierarchy and suggest that Corey's support for Trump automatically places him lower. This assumption is a huge leap and reveals your own bias. Morality isn't defined by a single political event or affiliation. Your argument here only exposes how shallow your own understanding of moral complexity is, assuming moral high ground by demonizing those you disagree with, rather than seeking any real insight into what he stood for." Okay, I think you're jumping the gun here, because all I did here was make a point about how being a man of conviction and a brother of the fire service and all that other stuff doesn't tell us anything about your deeper ideological commitments. And, I was laying the ground for getting to the point where I'm criticizing Corey for his support for Trump, but you're exaggerating the degree to which I assume that I have the moral high ground. Like, I do think I have the moral high ground, but I'm going to justify it, right? Like, you should criticize my justification of it rather than the setup to my justification of it. So, next section, from 127 to 224, what Corey stood for. In this section, I said the following. Evaluate Corey's position on our moral hierarchy. What exactly did the guy stand up for? Where did his convictions lie? Well, by his mere presence at a Trump rally, we know that he stood for an aspiring autocrat who tried to subvert the peaceful transfer of power, who's openly talked about terminating the Constitution, suggested that a U.S. general be executed for treason, and invited Russia to attack our NATO allies. So at minimum, we know that he supported a man who sought to overthrow the U.S. government, who would take pleasure in the death of a United States general, and who would call for our enemies to attack our allies at the drop of a hat. All of which is just a long-winded way of saying that he supported an enemy of the United States. Now, I don't know about you guys, but where I come from, around my parts, around my private parts, around my motherfucking neck of the woods, if you support one of my enemies, that makes you one of my enemies, right? Ergo, if you support an enemy of the United States, that makes you an enemy of the United States. Okay, so the basic case I'm making is that Trump is an enemy of the United States. Why am I saying this? Because he's expressed his desire to execute a United States general, because he's called on one of our adversaries to attack our allies, and because he, tried to incite an insurrection against the United States. These are all anti-American things that convey an attitude of opposition to America, which is why he's an enemy of the United States. And the addendum that I make to that point is that anybody who supports any of this shit is also an enemy of the United States. And Guitar Gunner responds to that by saying, "You claim that because Corey was at a Trump rally, he stood for everything associated with Trump, including extreme views. This is a blatant straw man argument. You reduce Corey to an ideological punching bag, ignoring the reality that political beliefs are often nuanced. Equating him to the worst of Trump's positions is cheap and reveals more about your own narrow worldview than it does about Comperatore." So a couple points on this. First, you haven't engaged at all with my claim that Trump is an enemy of the United States. So you should do that, right? You should respond with whether or not you think Trump doing all those things makes him an enemy of the United States. And after that, you say, it's unfair of me to assume that because Corey was at a Trump rally, he subscribes to everything that Trump believes. And this is true. For example, if I were to go to a Harrison Walz rally, it would be unfair for someone to assume that just because I was at the rally, I agree 100% with all their policy prescriptions. But it wouldn't be unfair for them to assume that given whatever understanding of Harris and Waltz I have come to the conclusion that it's more reasonable to support them than it is to not support them, right? Whatever extreme views they have. So I think I'm being fair to Corey when I do the same, right? I'm not saying he believes 100% of whatever Trump believes, but I'm saying that he believes enough of it that he thinks it's warranted to support him. And that is wrong, in my view. I don't think any reasonable person, any well-wisher of the United States can believe such a thing. Moving on. 224 to 312, enemy of the United States. This is what I say. What are my enemies? Right? Ergo, if you support an enemy of the United States, that makes you an enemy of the United States. Right? Transitive property type. If we take a look at Corey's Twitter feed, we can see that he prefers the company of a Russian dictator who bombs children's hospitals and shopping malls over the company of his compatriots. He's also content to respond to concerns about the welfare of Palestinian families whose homes have been destroyed by saying they'll get over it, just as the Japanese did. And you know what's wild about this last tweet? He was responding to none other than our very own champion of human decency, Piers Morgan. What a small world we live in. Anyway, notice the asymmetry here. This dead jackass gets to freely express his support for potential and actual dictators and make light of Palestinian suffering, but the second Destiny makes fun of him for getting shot, the pussies on this panel want to start pearl clutching and pissing themselves trying to defend the guy's legacy. Okay. You label Corey as an enemy of the United States based on a series of assumptions, reaching the absurd conclusion that his attendance at a rally makes him a threat to his country. This isn't only factually incorrect, it's borderline paranoid. Labeling political opponents as enemies is a dangerous oversimplification, and your eagerness to throw this label around shows a complete lack of respect for diverse perspectives within a democracy. Okay, so let's just go through this sentence by sentence. You label Corey as an enemy of the United States based on a series of assumptions. This is true. These are the assumptions, okay? The first assumption is that enemies of the United States exist. Trump is one example of them. And the second assumption is that if you support an enemy of the United States, that makes you an enemy of the United States. So far, I'm seeing no engagement with either of those assumptions. And then you say, reaching the absurd conclusion that his attendance at a rally makes him a threat to his country. Attending a generic rally doesn't make anyone a threat to the country, right? It all depends on what political purpose is being served by attendance at the rally. For example, let's say that you're a Native American extremist and that you believe that all of America is one big settler colony and that it should be brought back into the hands of its rightful owners through violence, right? And you want people to rally around that cause. You invite people to a physical rally to come and join hands with you in furthering that movement. And yeah, like that goal goes against the survival of the United States. And being a part of it makes you an enemy of the United States. And so it would be the case for any other insurrectionist movement, as it is with Trump and his Confederates, right? He tried to insurrect the government. People supported him then, people support him now, and they are all party to this conspiracy to overthrow and impede the proper functioning of our government, as it was conceived by the Founding Fathers. So when you say this isn't only factually incorrect, it's borderline paranoid, that's bullshit. I'm basing my concerns about how much of a threat someone poses to the country on what they actually believe about how the country should run and what kind of presidential candidates they put forward. If you put forward Donald Trump as a candidate who has said he's going to pardon all the January 6th patriots, and he's got J.D. Vance with him who said he would have refused to certify the results of the election, that's not me engaging in reflexive and small-minded political tribalism. That's me observing a threat and commenting on the threat and saying, yeah, that's a fucking threat. Like, we should take that seriously. So, labeling political opponents as enemies is a dangerous oversimplification, and your eagerness to throw this label around shows a complete lack of respect for diverse perspectives within a democracy. This is true. In a pluralistic society like the United States, I should be tolerant of political differences. And generally speaking, I am. Okay, there are lots of people in the U.S. that I disagree with. But our disagreement is based on a foundation of saying, okay, the Constitution works. We're going to agree that no one's going to use political violence or dehumanizing language, and we're all going to share a commitment to telling the truth and being honest, upstanding citizens. And, we're just going to try and convince each other through persuasion rather than coercion and name-calling and lying and deception and all that other shit. But Trump supporters don't share that commitment, right? Trump himself has called people who disagree with him politically the enemy within and threaten to deploy the military against them. So if you're going to criticize me, saying that, I'm being too intolerant of political differences, Guitar Gunner, I expect you to condemn Trump for being much more guilty of that charge. So I look forward to that condemnation. Continuing, from 312 to 352, Asymmetry of Empathy. The pussies on this panel want to start pearl clutching and pissing themselves trying to defend the guy's legacy. According to them, norms of civility and decency are only to be enforced against people who criticize indecency and incivility. Maggots get a free pass to be as maliciously edgy and insensitive as they want to be, but as soon as you start giving them that same energy, they just turn into fucking Caitlyn Jenner. All right? They do some gender reassignment surgery on themselves, just chop the dick and balls all the way the fuck off, and then start identifying as a bunch of dainty little hoes who would never hurt a soul. Just the most inoffensive little bitches that you ever laid your eyes on. You know what I think a fitting analogy for this dumbass story would be? Okay. You criticize others for supporting Corey while ignoring, as you claim, the wider context of his beliefs. Yet, you completely ignore Corey's humanity, dismissing him as a dead jackass who, in your words, deserved no empathy. This is hypocrisy at its worst. You demand empathy for groups you care about while gleefully denying it to Corey. Your selective empathy reveals that your so-called moral outrage is nothing more than an excuse to dehumanize those who disagree with you. So, I'm kind of blanking on this because criticize others for supporting Corey while ignoring, as you claim, the wider context of his beliefs. I don't ignore the wider context of his beliefs. I highlighted quite clearly in the video that he supports Putin, he supports Trump. These are unacceptable beliefs to me. I think that these are anti-American beliefs and that they should be criticized, and anyone who works in furtherance of those beliefs should be laughed at, mocked, ostracized, ridiculed, etc. Right? We don't need to treat them with respect. Yet you completely ignore Corey's humanity, dismissing him as a dead jackass who, in your words, deserved no sympathy. This is true. I stand by those words. I think anyone who believes what Corey believed isn't worthy of my moral consideration. And sure, he's human, but he's a human with a fairly detestable and deplorable worldview, and I think I should criticize him for it, whether he's dead or alive. Then you say that this is hypocrisy at its worst. You demand empathy for groups you care about while gleefully denying it to Corey. I don't think I said anything about having empathy for groups I care about. I'm just shitting on Corey because I dislike his politics, and I'm giving reasons for why I dislike his politics. Your selective empathy reveals that your so-called moral outrage is nothing more than an excuse to dehumanize those who disagree with you. Again, I never said anything about having empathy for other groups. I am outraged at Corey and the kind of cult of martyrdom that has been propped up in his name, and I'm expressing my outrage at those objects. So there's no hypocrisy here. You can deny empathy to whoever you want to, and I can shit on Corey for being a dead jackass. Next point. From 352 to 422. False equivalency with extremism. I say, imagine a bunch of Klan members are holding a rally where they're all wearing their white hoods and burning crosses and chanting, "You will not replace us," and then upon hearing gunfire, one of them gets shot and killed while protecting his family. I would hope that decent people would react to such an incident by saying, "Damn, that sucks. I don't fuck with the Klan at all, but this is America, and people should be free to express their political opinions, however odious they are to the rest of us, without fear of violent reprisal." Right? So that's the first reaction I would want. Okay. You make an outrageous comparison between Corey's attendance at a Trump rally and a hypothetical scenario of someone at a Klan rally, claiming that both deserve to be condemned equally. No, this is wrong. Nowhere in the video did I say that attendees of both rallies deserve to be condemned equally. I was just illustrating the point that different rallies stand for different values and different political projects, and we should take that into account when judging the moral worth of any casualties of political violence at those rallies. So then you say, this false equivalency is both offensive and grossly exaggerated. I would agree if that was a false equivalency that I made, but that's not what I fucking said. Next sentence, you're intentionally equating political affiliation with extremist ideologies, which is absurd. Trying to cast him in the same light as an extremist shows a complete disregard for reality and a willingness to bend the truth to suit your narrative. That's fucking rich. For a maggot to claim that he cares about reality and not bending the truth to suit one's political narrative is fucking insane. But yeah, like that's what you just did here. you put words in my mouth that I didn't say to suit your narrative of saying that support for Trump is totally normal and should be treated with just as much respect and civility as support for any other political movement. As a bullshit narrative, and I am attempting to debunk it in speaking on this topic and responding to anyone who would attempt to advance it. Moral stature and character, I would want. And then on second thought, I would want people to say, but if I step away from the civil liberties aspect of the whole thing and just think about, like the moral statures of the people involved, I think it's pretty clear that they're all pieces of shit. They're literally Klan members. And sure, maybe one of them makes like a mean apple pie or helps out at his local homeless shelter on the weekend, but my appreciation of those aspects of his character is overshadowed by my disgust for his conscious and deliberate enthusiasm for white supremacy. But the attitude that pseudo-journalists like Piers seem to have taken is to focus solely on the Klan member's final act of valor, to the exclusion of any consideration of the wider context in which he was operating. There's no mention of the fact that the guy was a Klan member, that he had fairly sinister ideological commitments about non-white people, and that the whole reason he was there was to express those commitments and further his political agenda. The way a fellow like Piers tells it, you wouldn't even know he was a Klan member. To an outside observer, it would seem like a poor guy who just wanted to have some fun got shot at an especially festive Halloween party. You attempt to undermine Corey's character by stating that any good actions he might have taken, like supporting his family or doing his job as a firefighter, are overshadowed by his perceived political alignment. Okay, first off, to describe it as his perceived political alignment, like as if I'm making an unreasonable assumption by assuming that he aligns politically with Trump, is bullshit. He's a Trump supporter attending a Trump rally, knowing full well who the Trump is. Okay, so stop doing that obfuscation. That's not going to work with me. Then you say, this is a disgusting reduction of a person's life to your own political yardstick, implying that all virtue is erased by political differences. This is not true. My position isn't that all virtue is erased by political differences. It's that all virtue is rendered irrelevant by political differences that pose a unique threat to the survival of the country. So, yeah, I think Trumpism and this cult of conspiracy thinking and lying and shameless political partisanship is disgusting and destructive to the survival of the country. That's the yardstick I'm operating by. Everything else other than that, as much as I disagree with it, I'm down to tolerate it. But that shit, I want nothing to fucking do with it, and I want to marginalize anyone who contributes to that problem. Then you say, moral stature is defined by actions, integrity, and character, not by your personal political checklist. This is, yeah, I think I would agree with that, but I see personal political checklists as an extension of a person's actions, integrity, and character. Like, if you're this is something interesting I've been thinking about as of late, actually. I saw this picture on Twitter the other day of Alex Jones with a cute painting that he drew with his daughter. Now, it was an adorable picture, and if I had known nothing else about Alex Jones, I would assume, wow, look at this stand-up guy. He's just such a thoughtful, loving, and caring dad spending time with his daughter in such a wholesome way. But one thing I do know about Alex Jones is that his lies have contributed to the immiseration of parents who lost their children in a school shooting. And a school shooting that I'm fairly confident that most Trump supporters would say was a false flag, right? Because of Alex Jones's lies about that incident. And those parents had to move 10 times. They had to suffer from the retarded delusions of Jones's audience. And Trump has legitimized that figure in right-wing spaces, right? He says, this guy, this Alex Jones guy, I fuck with him. I like him. Who gives a shit what he did to those parents? Now, if you want to be a retard and say, yeah, well, all I care about is Alex Jones's personal relationship with his daughter, and I don't care about the hell that he manufactured for those parents, you're free to say that, but then I think I'm free to say that you're a fucking idiot and a morally unserious person. Moving on. Civility for me, but not for thee. You accuse others of being overly sympathetic towards Corey's final act of valor, while completely disregarding the context of his life and values. Yes, this is true. I'm saying that to focus on someone's final act of valor to the exclusion of their life and the values that they chose to support and further in their life is a mistake. And then you say, however, the irony is that you extend civility only to those who align with your ideology. I don't know how you could make this assumption when I never said anything about my ideology. I think it's fair to assume that I like America, but apart from that, I don't know how you can say whether I'm a liberal or a conservative based on what I said in the video. I mean, I guess nowadays you can tell because conservatives are out of their fucking mind, but yeah, like I didn't say anything overtly partisan in this video for you to make an assumption about what my ideology is. Actually, that's not true. There are two ideologies functioning in America right now. One is anti-Trump and the other is for Trump. Under the anti-Trump umbrella, you have obviously mostly liberals and a couple brave and valiant conservatives. So I'm in that camp, and I don't think you can intuit what position I'm at in that camp based on what I've said here. You can say pretty clearly that I am against Trump, so I'll give you that. You say, the double standard here is glaring. You demand decency for those you support while denying it to others. This is true, but again, it's not true in the kind of tribalistic sense that you're trying to ascribe to me. Like I'm cool with being civil with people I disagree with, granted that they subscribe to the same like civilization preserving institutions that I subscribe to. And Trump and his supporters don't do that. They make fun of victims of political violence. So in this first clip, what we're going to see is what happened to Paul Pelosi after an attacker showed up to his house with a hammer.
Hi, hey guys. How you doing?
How are you?
What's going on, man?
Everything's good.
Hi. Drop the hammer.
Nope. Hey.
What is going on right
I'm
now?
not getting an answer on call.
All right, so Paul Pelosi got his head bashed in by a guy with a hammer. Let's see what Trump had to say about it.
And we'll stand up to crazy Nancy Pelosi who ruined San Francisco.
Okay. All right.
How's her husband doing, by the way? Anybody know?
Ooh, what the fuck? That was out of line. He's going too far. Right, guys? Right? Isn't that fucked up that he just said that about a guy who got his head bashed in with a hammer? I don't think a maggot has any leg to stand on when complaining about not being universally civil. You niggas, by definition, are not civil, right? You're assholes. You can see that in basically any forum that you open your mouth to speak. You take pleasure in lies and bombast and evil, basically. From 529 to 601, rationalizing Corey's death. That's what explains all the ghosts and the raging bonfires and the funny dance moves. In any case, I'm not saying that law-abiding maggots should get shot for exercising their First Amendment rights. I'm saying that in cases where they do get shot, our assessment of their moral worth should be grounded in reality, as opposed to a desire to pander to the sensibilities of their delusional allies. We should speak honestly about the kind of world they were trying to build, and why, to the extent that their death is a diminution of the chances of that world becoming a reality, all other things being held equal, it's probably a good thing that they died. You rationalize Corey's death as a diminution of the chances for Trump's vision of the world to become reality. This rationalization for celebrating someone's death reveals a deeply disturbing lack of humanity. By condoning death based on political disagreement, you're abandoning any claim to decency. This isn't moral outrage, it's cold-hearted tribalism. This is bullshit, and I can prove that it's bullshit by looking to 3 wars. All right, we got the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, and World War II. In all of those wars, people are condoning death based on political disagreement. So what the fuck are you trying to say? Are you trying to say that George Washington, because he condoned death for the British loyalists, he abandoned any claim to decency? Same thing with Abe Lincoln. He condones death for the Confederate soldiers that were fighting against the Union Army. Is he a bad guy? What about Winston Churchill and the rest of the Allied powers? So yeah, you're talking shit here. This doesn't make any sense. Death can absolutely be condoned in certain circumstances, and everything I'm saying here is in the service of making sure that people don't die. I want you not to die for this bullshit cause. From 601 to the 7-minute mark, distorted interpretation of the Constitution. Probably a good thing that they died. 99 tumors are better than 100, regardless of how you get rid of the 100th tumor. Likewise, 99 maggots are better than 100, regardless of how you get rid of the last maggot. Of course, we should all hope that they're neutralized through conversation rather than violence, but let's be clear about our reasons for having that preference. Killing maggots isn't wrong because their lives are just as valuable as anyone else's. Killing maggots is wrong because of the risk that normalizing political violence poses to people whose lives actually do matter. And in an American context, I think we should make this demarcation between lives that matter and lives that don't, by looking to the preamble of our Constitution and assessing the contributions of the life we're judging to the goals listed therein. So let's try doing that with Trump, the man who Corey died supporting. Does Trump help us form a more perfect union? No. Trump has done more to damage the state of our union and the norms and institutions that have traditionally safeguarded its perfection. You invoke the Constitution using the preamble as a measure for human worth, arguing that Corey's support for Trump means he opposed justice and domestic tranquility. This is not only a warped interpretation, but is also highly selective. The Constitution doesn't serve as a purity test for worthiness, and your attempt to weaponize it to dehumanize Comperatore speaks to a complete lack of understanding of democratic values. I think you're also dead wrong on this point. I don't know if I'll concede, but I'll acknowledge that we don't typically think of the preamble of the Constitution as a sort of barometer for measuring the moral worth of another human being. But to the best of my knowledge, that's a novel proposal that I'm making because I think it just makes sense in an American context, right? Like, the framers of the Constitution came up with this preamble because they were trying to inaugurate a set of values that they thought civic engagement should be guided by. And I think it's totally fair to say anyone who doesn't conform to these values is worth less than someone who does. And the examples that I present for Trump's opposition to justice and domestic tranquility, I think are clear-cut. I don't think you can accuse me of being a partisan when I say that he's evading justice by installing a judge who just throws his case out of court because she's a loyalist to Trump, or installing Supreme Court justices who hand him an immunity decision that prevents him from being held to account for his conspiracy to overthrow the government. And the same is true with domestic tranquility. As things were 8 years ago, they were better than they are now. And the reason that they're so bad now is that Trump has broken so many norms of civility and sanity and just basic decency in public office and paid no price for it, that it set a precedent for other members of the Republican Party to say, look, we can act like amoral jackasses too and pay no price for it, so let's just let loose, right? Let's just all be dishonest and opportunistic assholes and see what comes of it. And this is what we have 8 years later. We just have a party that believes hurricanes are controlled by the fucking government or possibly Jews, who knows. And yeah, it's just bullshit, man. Like, this is not a situation of domestic tranquility, and Trump is largely to blame for that problem. Okay, 7 minutes to 7:30. Irrelevance and guilt by association on Trump's justice system criticisms at its perfection than anyone else in modern American history. Does Trump help us establish justice? Once again, no. A concern for justice entails a respect for fairness and the truth, neither of which can be found in the recesses of Trump's brain. He's undermined the rule of law by threatening to prosecute his political opponents, alleging that all efforts to investigate his criminal conduct are themselves a witch hunt, and eroding his base's trust in the courts whenever they rule against him. Baselessly casting aspersions on the independence and trustworthiness of our... This is irrelevant and another guilt by association argument. People back leaders for many reasons. Supporting Trump does not mean Corey endorsed every stance, especially unrelated issues like judicial criticism. Assuming his political beliefs are identical to the most controversial aspects of Trump's legacy serves only to vilify Corey without considering his specific values or motivations. I don't need to know shit about his specific values or motivations. I feel that it's sufficient for me to criticize Corey for expressing material support for Trump by attending one of his rallies. That action that he did tells me that whatever knowledge he has of Trump's policy prescriptions and character and just mere existence has guided him towards making the judgment that it makes more sense for him to support him than condemn him. And knowing that one fact about a person is enough for me to say they're fucking worthless. They have nothing to contribute to the betterment of our society, and they're actively making it worse. Okay, 8:30 to 10:01. Lives that matter.
Thank you. Thank you.
What a sight for sore eyes it is to see a Republican who won't reflexively question his political rival's competence, citizenship, and loyalty to this country. Meanwhile, this Nick Trump wants to argue with Rachel Scott about whether Kamala is a black or Indian DEI hire.
Sir, do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is only on the ticket because she is a black woman?
Well, I can say no, I think it's maybe a little bit different. So I've known her a long time indirectly, not directly very much, and she was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
She has always
But you know
identified
what?
as a black woman.
I
She went to a
respect either
historically black
one.
college.
I respect either one, but she obviously doesn't, because she was Indian all the way, and then all of a sudden she made a turn and she became a black person.
Just to be clear, sir, do
And
you
I
believe
think,
that
I think
she is
somebody should look into that too when you ask continue in a very hostile, nasty tone.
What about providing for the common defense? Threatening to abandon our NATO allies, actually abandoning our Kurdish ones, and blocking aid to Ukraine as it attempts to defend itself against the predations of a dictator are not provisions for the common defense. They're concessions to our enemies, who will make good use of them should the day ever come that we need the help of the allies we've betrayed. Does Trump help promote the general welfare? Negative. Trump has a history of threat. You make a deeply offensive remark suggesting that Corey's life doesn't matter, because by your standards, he didn't contribute to your vision of America. Just a point of clarification here. It's not my standards. I didn't pull these standards out of my ass, okay? Whoever wrote the Constitution, it's their standards, okay? It's the standards that they set during the founding of this country. So, yeah, they aren't my standards. He didn't contribute to your vision of America. He didn't contribute not just to my vision of America, he didn't contribute to the Founding Fathers' vision of America. This is as morally bankrupt as it gets. You're essentially saying that only people who agree with your politics are worthy of respect. It's disturbing to see such blatant tribalism used to justify stripping away someone's intrinsic value as a human being. Again, I'll refer you back to the examples of the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, and World War II. In each of those cases, you have people's intrinsic value as human beings being disregarded based on political differences, okay? In the Revolutionary War, it's the conflict of living under the rule of a tyrant and living under the rule of a democracy. So that's a case where people thought it was right and just to kill other people because of their political differences. And I think they made the right call. Same thing with the Civil War, okay? In the Civil War, what you had was a conflict over the southern states' desire to expand the practice of slavery to the western territories, and this idea that they had that they could just secede from the Union without paying any price for it. There was a political difference on the propriety of owning slaves and the propriety of secession. People disagreed over whether you can own slaves and whether you can secede from the Union. And thousands of people paid for that disagreement with their lives. Once again, I think they deserved it. World War II, Nazism versus liberalism. These are two conflicting political worldviews. One won through violence, and they were right to win through violence. In each of these conflicts, whether it's with the British loyalists, the Confederate soldiers, or the Nazis and the Axis powers, people's intrinsic humanity was being stripped away because of their political differences. Now, if you want to take the side of all those losers throughout history, be my guest, right? But I prefer sticking with the winners, right? I think the winners, they did a great job, and I hope to contribute to the moral progress that they've secured for the rest of us. 1001 has a history of threatening to withhold aid from his fellow Americans for reasons that are purely political. He only wishes welfare on those who agree with him, which is to say that he promotes a very specific rather than general welfare. Does he help secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity? Nope. Trump doesn't understand, much less believe in, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, or the right to protest. Seeing as how Trump's 0 for 6 when it comes to honoring the goals of the preamble, and 0 for 7 if we count ordaining and establishing the Constitution as a goal, because, he wanted to terminate it, true American patriots can confidently say that his life has no value. They can also say that anyone who supports him, by lacking the good sense to notice, as well as the courage to criticize, his flagrant insults to our nation's most important founding document, is also worthless from the point of view of America. Based on the explanations I've provided, I think it's incontrovertibly true to say that for well-wishers of the United States of America, the death of Corey Comperatore is no biggie. So fuck him. May his memory serve as a cautionary tale for any maggot who dares to dream that his death will be an occasion for the rest of us to grant him leniency for his consummate stupidity and treason. By the end, you openly state that Corey's life has no value, claiming his death should serve as a cautionary tale for others who support Trump. This is where you completely forfeit any moral high ground. If you're willing to dismiss someone's life as expendable because of their political beliefs, then you're the one engaging in the very dehumanization you claim to oppose. This isn't an argument for justice or decency. It's an admission of your own moral void. I don't think so. I disagree. I think, more than anything else, you've exposed the moral vacuousness of whatever the fuck you believe. You seem to assume as a fundamental principle of your worldview that death and violence is just totally unjustified when it comes to political differences. And that's not a view that I share. As I've said multiple times in this video, I think some people deserve to die for having certain political views, and I'm not saying that's the case for all Trump supporters yet, but I can certainly conceive of a case where that is true, right? For example, if in this upcoming election, Trump does some fuck shit and decides to incite people to violence and say, you need to kill everyone who disagrees with me, and people start going out onto the streets and doing that, then those people deserve to die, right? I don't think that's a controversial take. But everything I've been saying up till this point is that there's a whole lot of moral condemnation to be spread around, even before it gets to the point of people putting bullets in mags and actually killing people on the street, right? Just the fact that these ideas are treated as normal and they're dignified in this way, that is worthy of condemnation. And this retarded style of argument that you've presented to me, where you're accusing me of being morally bankrupt while also being totally agnostic as to Trump's moral worth and Corey's moral worth, right? Like you're saying these guys are good and I'm bad without giving any reasons for why you feel that way and not really interacting with any of the reasons that I give for why I feel that way. That's also deplorable, right? You shouldn't, like at the opening of this, I said, thank you for engaging with the content of what I said. But as I've gone through your remarks, it's just become apparent to me that you're not really engaging with what I'm saying. You're putting words in my mouth. You're not engaging with the evidence that I present of Trump's lack of a commitment to justice and domestic tranquility, and just taking on board what I'm saying on those points. You ended off by saying, this whole video is a self-righteous rant that reveals more about your narrow tribalistic mindset than about Corey Comperatore. You claim to despise dehumanization, yet here you are treating a man's life as disposable, discarding his humanity for the sake of your own agenda. By stripping Corey down to a convenient stereotype, you're doing exactly what you claim to stand against, proving that, to you, decency and empathy are just tools to be weaponized against those you dislike. This isn't moral outrage. It's hypocrisy wrapped in self-righteousness. Okay. I think I'll respond to that by saying, this is not an engagement with what I said. This is retardation wrapped in highfalutin sounding words. Yeah, like you're fucking stupid. And if you want to have a conversation about how stupid you are, we can set that up at some point. But yeah, I think I didn't strip Corey down to a convenient stereotype. I looked at his Twitter feed. I looked at what he actually believed, and it was fair for me to assume that he was a Trump supporter and that he thought it made more sense to support Trump than to condemn him by his presence at a Trump rally. So that's also bullshit. I don't think I ever said anything about despising dehumanization. I think throughout that video, like throughout this and the larger essay that it was a part of, I engage in a lot of dehumanization. I actually say explicitly, we should talk about people like you and to people like you in dehumanizing terms. Like I think you're scum, really. And that feels weird for me to say, but that is actually how I feel. I think you're contributing to the destruction of this country, and you should be treated as such. So if you want to respond, I don't know if I want to keep doing this as like a comment video format. Like if you ever want to come on a call, like we can record it together and go from there, or this could be the end of the correspondence. I don't know. For some reason, I thought this would be, there would actually be some meat to chew on here, but it doesn't seem like there is. So that's it for today. Thanks for watching. See you later. Have a good one. Bye-bye.